It is also important to shout out those individuals that might not pop off the film all the time or might have faded to the background. I can only do this segment so many times per year. There's so much to get to. I don't have time for Tuesday trivia this week. Just so many things to discuss with this Penn State game. So, going to table that. It will return. It will return, I promise. But I want to start with Alex Harkey, who didn't always have a perfect game on Saturday. He got beat to allow the first sack of the year. But, you know, this is as much about the individual game as the season he's had. Alex Harkey has outplayed Isaiah World from what I've seen. PFF agrees. World hasn't been bad, but I don't think he has reached his full potential yet at left tackle. But it's the energy that Alex Harkey brings. And Dan Lanning got asked about it in his post-game press conference and was talking about how, you know, Harkey brings that kind of I'd want to go down an alley with you sort of mentality. Like he's just a dog. He's just one of those dudes that just is bullying people out there all the time. He had a lot of really good blocks and great sequences. Again, it was probably his worst game of the year, but I shout him out because his worst game still sees Oregon win, or he was helping Oregon win PFFs. I don't know why I can't talk. I don't know. Probably just done too much content today. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to try this again. Here we go. Alex Harkey was still a part of Oregon's offensive line that was PFF's offensive line of the week in all of college football. 1 sack allowed, only 2 total pressures, and the Ducks ran for 280 yards. Did not matter who was carrying the ball. Harkey's been that guy, and Poncho's what I expected. Emmanuel Prenon's been doing really well, but I just love the energy. You need those sorts of dudes. You know, Johnny Cornelius was an awesome player at right tackle. I don't feel like he had the same mindset that Harkey does that makes him stand out in my head like this. And it's just a fun thing to watch. And by the way, there's no shot at a Johnny Cornelius. Dude was a bona fide stud. And hope he has a long NFL career. I think he will. So, Alex Harkey's one guy. Another one, flying under the radar. And this is a guy who you and I, you as in many of you fans out there, and I had a prolonged discussion about in the offseason of sorts. Jamari Johnson. Jamari Johnson has surpassed my expectations because he looks fully healthy. Coming off an injury from last year at Louisville, you see why this guy was a blue chip tight end recruit. He looks big, fast, he's making great blocks, and he also has come up with some pretty key receptions. And this has been part of Oregon's offense for the last couple of years with Will Stein. They have been a big tight end screen team, and they threw one to Jamari Johnson on Saturday, and Jamari also had a 3rd down reception to keep a drive alive, and it was not a particularly easy play. So I was definitely on the lower expectation end for what Oregon has behind Kenyon Sadiq. Through the first 4 games, I feel better about that now than I did in the offseason. I think Jamari Johnson has looked really good. And obviously you want to see Sadiq on the field as much as you can because there's still nobody like him. Like, even Jamari Johnson can't run like Kenyon Sadiq can. You know, the stutter route on 4 verts against Northwestern for the touchdown, not last week, but the week before. Like, nobody can do that on Oregon's roster except Kenyon Sadiq. But Johnson keeps showing up in a couple of key spots, and I think he's blocking well. He's a real physical presence. He looks fast. He looks big, and he's doing some good things. It's not a huge role on offense, but that's why he's a part of this segment. You know, I don't come on here and say, well, Dante Moore is one of the top standouts. Well, duh. Of course. He went for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And DeCorey and Moore, yeah, that's the obvious one. But how about Gary Bryant? Stepping up with no Justice Lowe, and Jeremiah McClellan deserves a mention in this segment as well, catching his first touchdown last year. McClellan's also a great blocker on the perimeter. We know DeCorian is. That's been a big thing for Oregon this year. I didn't think they were actually as sharp as they have been in prior games blocking on the outside. I mean, Sadiq in particular, you know, if he picks up a block on Dante Moore's long scramble, like he just whiffed the guy in space, it's a tough block to make. But if he makes it, Dante Moore might run for what wound up being a 64-yard touchdown. It was still how long was his run? It was still a 28-yard carry, but there was more to be had, and Sadiq just missed. But anyway, Gary Bryant, Jeremiah McClellan are I think, just proof once again that the depth of this Oregon receiver room is crazy awesome. Remember, we have not Evan Stewart. Maybe he plays this year, maybe he doesn't. But Evan Stewart is a stud. You lost Jurion Dickey before the year. And does anybody have any qualms about the receiver room? No. And Gary Bryant just being a steady veteran presence out there. He caught a long touchdown against the Beavs on a nice throw from Dante Moore and a cool play design by Will Stein. You know, they faked the swing screen and pulled the offensive lineman around to try to sell the run, and then he runs right down the field, makes the play. Like, he's just really reliable, and it was a 49-yard touchdown, and I appreciate what Gary Bryant is. Now, he did not have his best day fielding punts. He had one good return, but he had a couple others that he wasn't able to catch, and those are the sorts of things that definitely need to get cleaned up when you're playing Penn State because the margins are going to be really thin. But as a wide receiver, yeah, Gary Bryant is just he's so solid. He's so solid, and that's a really nice piece for Dante Moore to have on the perimeter. Last couple of guys, and curious to hear you think, drop them in the comments below. Aiden Breland, Amari Washington, Mateo Uyunglele. Upon rewatching the game, one in which Oregon State had 167 total yards, 147 total yards of offense, which is a staggeringly low number, regardless of how Oregon State has been this year and what Oregon expects to be. That's an insanely low number. 67 rushing yards allowed. Yeah, after the one drive, Oregon made some adjustments in there. Aiden Breland had a couple of quarterback pressure moments. Amari Washington didn't have the big impact that we saw maybe against Montana State and Oklahoma State earlier this year. And neither did Mateo, because there were a lot of run plays in this game, a lot of quick hitters, which is the right game plan from Oregon State. Of course, it didn't matter because the secondary is so good. I forgot to include one name on here I'll get to in a moment. But those guys, when I went back and watched the game again, they were winning their blocks, and they were just winning a lot. And they were very disruptive. They were Amari in particular. I'm chair of the Amari Washington fan club, so of course I was watching for it. But Amari Washington was really good. Breland did some nice things, and Mateo, his dad, tweeted out his highlights from the game, and made the same point that I had observed as well, and just mentioned that they were running and doing quick passing. You're not going to generate sacks there, but Mateo had, I think there was a stretch where he beat a tackle. Somebody tweeted it at me, and I had seen it as well, that he'd beaten the tackle 3 times in a row. He was just very disruptive out there. So too were Amari Washington, Aiden Breland, even though it didn't really show up in the box score. I don't think that Oregon didn't record a sack in this game. Only 2 TFLs, Tatum Tuioti and Tony Gray combined for those two. But yeah, I think that what they did in the trenches was really good. And then I want to close with Brandon Finney. This guy is a true freshman, and man, he looks really good. Trent Walker, Oregon State's go-to receiver, had just 3 targets in this game. Anytime, it didn't matter which receiver was going up against Finney. Ify Obadegwu's been solid this year as well. Finney has been Oregon's best corner. I think he is Oregon's best corner right now. And that's an incredible thing to say about a true freshman 4 games into the season. But right now, Penn State's top receiver, probably Kyron Hudson. It depends on the day. If you tell me, all right, I know Penn State's going to throw in a big spot to Kyron Hudson, who do you want guarding him? I'm going with Brandon Finney. I'm 100% on the Brandon Finney hype train here. I think this guy is going to be an absolute stud at defensive back. And the secondary in the coming years going to continue to be really, really good. But those are my individual standouts from the week.